Good day, everyone, and welcome to the October PNW DEWS Drought and Climate Outlook webinar. My name is Holly Prindeville. I'm the coordinator with the USDA Northwest Climate Hub. This is a bi-monthly webinar series hosted by NIDIS, the USDA Northwest Climate Hub, and the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute. It is designed to provide partners and other interested parties in the Pacific Northwest with timely drought and climate information. Each webinar will be tailored to reflect recent and current forecasted, each webinar will be tailored to reflect recent, current, and forecasted conditions and climate events, but will also include discussions of observed impacts and other related updates from across the region. Webinars and recordings and other supporting information will be available on drought.gov later this week. And if you've signed up for our emails, you'll get notifications when those are ready. After today's webinar, you'll have an opportunity to provide us feedback on how to help us improve this webinar so it fits your needs. So let us know what you think, and we appreciate that. Today's agenda will have a climate recap and current conditions from Guillaume Maugère with the Office of Washington State Climatologist, seasonal conditions and climate outlook from Jonah Infanti with the Climate Prediction Center, National Weather Model Guidance from Robin Fox at the National Weather Service Office in Spokane, and then Embedding Molecular Biology in Ecosystem Restoration, or EMBER, from Tara Hudeberg at the University of Idaho. Before we begin these presentations, I'll just highlight our partners who make this webinar series possible. The Northwest Climate Hub develops and delivers science-based region-specific information that assists agricultural and natural resource managers with climate-informed decision-making, specifically for Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. And I'll add the web links at the end here. OCRI, or the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute, is a network of researchers in Oregon's public universities who work with public and private entities to advance understanding of regional climate and climate adaptation. OCRI is administered by Oregon State University and hosts the Oregon Climate Service, the Office of the State Climatology of Oregon. NIDIS, the National Integrated Drought Information System, was established in 2006 by public law with the mission to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risks by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential of drought and better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS is building the foundation of a national drought early warning system through the development of regional DEWS, where networks of partners and end users share information and actions that help communities cope with drought. While the ultimate goal is a national early warning system, we recognize the impacts and early warning information differ across the region. Each DEWS has many of the same base ingredients, but ultimately have their own flavor to reflect the needs of their region. You can go to drought.gov to see the strategic plan and current activities of the Pacific Northwest Drought Early Warning System. To facilitate our early warning system, more precipitation observations are needed, and we encourage you to join COCORAS, the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. This is a unique nonprofit community-based network of volunteers of all ages and backgrounds working together to measure and map precipitation, specifically rain, hail, and snow, as well as reporting conditions. Observations by COCORAS observers of precipitation events and the lack of precipitation are important to help capture and improve our understanding of weather. To become a volunteer and learn more, visit cocoras.org or contact your state coordinator, and we'll have those names in the chat box here shortly. Understanding how drought impacts you is important for drought assessment at the state, regional, and national levels. The National Drought Mitigation Center has a condition monitoring observer reports, or CMOR, as a way to submit the impacts you're experiencing, whether that be from too much rain or too little. Become an observer and report your impacts. This information is also useful for the annual Pacific Northwest Drought Water Year Assessment. You can go to, the link will be added, but go.unl.edu/CMOR drought. So that you can learn how to do this and see what's been reported. We have two events. So tomorrow, we'll be having the Oregon and Washington water year meeting. It will be a recap of what was experienced in the 2024 water year and then an outlook for the 2025 water year. The goal of this meeting is to gather information regarding climate impacts from the water year, and these can also include impacts from the warmer than normal temperatures across the region, the lack of snowpack, heat waves, and changing drought conditions. And again, forecast experts will also provide expectations for 2025. Participants have the opportunity to fill out a water year survey, and the survey and meeting will both go into the Pacific Northwest Water Year Impacts Assessment. The QR code on the screen, you can take a picture of that for a registration code or to get to the registration page, and we'll also add that to the chat box. Idaho is also going to have a fall water supply meeting that will be on the 19th of November. And this meeting will be hybrid, both online and in person, and you need to register to attend, which is similar to the Oregon and Washington meeting as well. The goal of the meeting is to recap the water supply from the last year and provide insight on how climate impacts and buildup of and meltdown of the year's snowpack, timing of irrigation, as well as how much water storage remained by the end of the year. Participants will have an opportunity to fill out the end of water year survey. That survey again goes towards the PNW Water Year Impacts Assessment. This QR code will take you to the registration page for the Idaho meeting. And if you have any questions, please contact David Hokema, the hydrologist at the Idaho Department of Water Resources. There are many ways to stay in touch with NIDIS. In the past, if you've registered for our webinar, you were able to be added to the PNW DEWS email list so that you get the recording. This, however, is no longer the case. So if you came upon the webinar in any other way than a direct email, you want to receive the recording or any other pertinent information from the PNW DEWS, please follow the links that will be added to the chat box, and then note that you're interested in our biweekly Dry Times newsletter or our tribal engagement newsletter, along with our PNW DEWS information. And with that, here's our list of contacts. I'll share them again when we get to the end. So we'll switch to our first speaker, Guillaume. Let me make you presenter here. And Guillaume, you are muted right now. Are you able to share your slides with us, or do you need me to do that?
I am, and unfortunately, my apologies. I have to reboot GoToMeeting. I will be back in 30 seconds. Sorry. Okay. Unless you'd like me to just talk and share the screens I sent this morning, but otherwise, it'll just take me the minute to. My apologies.
Sure. Why don't you come in, so this way, if you've updated your slides, we have the latest ones.
Okay.
While we wait for Guillaume to come in, any questions about Kokoraz or Seymour or any other drought questions to help that I might be able to help you with?
Hi, I have a question. It's Tara.
Sure.
I apologize because I wasn't paying super close attention already, but I guess in terms of like, and we'll hear more about like my project later as a PI of a project that's looking at drought and its impact on ecosystems. It'd be, I guess, and I've interacted with tools from all the agencies over time and climate output centers and whatnot, but we are doing a lot of modeling. So climate data and even like that nearer term better forecasting data will be better for us, I think, for some of our projects. So just kind of throwing that out there as a way to make a note in my head and to you guys about collaborations moving forward with the center and with OCRI and getting that climate, gridded climate type of data for modeling projects. But it's not really a question. I guess I just want to make a note of that.
So they should reach out to you, Tara, which I have your email up here now, to follow up on that.
Okay.
And we'll try to get that into the chat for everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Holly, I'm here and ready. I think I just need presenter privileges.
Okay, you should have that.
Okay, thank you. And okay, I believe everyone's looking at the correct slide.
People in the snow.
Oh, and in fact, it's my final slide. So let me scroll back, and apologies again for the technical difficulties there. Okay, and for that reason, I'll just jump right in. I'm here to talk about the current conditions in the Northwest. And I'm going to jump into just first, so I'm going to go backwards a little bit, so past to forward. Here, what you're seeing is the average temperature on the left, average temperature departure from normal, or anomaly as we call them, on the left. And same thing for precipitation on the right. And overall, you'll see the numbers in a moment, but a bit warm, about 2 degrees warmer than normal in terms of temperature, and a mix in terms of precipitation. And there's sort of this axis going from Medford, Oregon, up towards Spokane, Washington, where we've seen abnormally dry conditions, in particular in that northeast part of the Columbia Plateau there. It's been particularly dry, right down to 30% or less than normal. And what you'll see is that kind of is accentuating as we march forward. Right now, we're looking at basically August, September, October. Here's if we just do the last 60 days, right? So this is basically September and October. You can see it's that warm anomaly has increased. So the last 2 months are warmer compared to just the last 3. And then that dry anomaly and on that axis I was mentioning is more extreme as well. This next slide is now showing the last 30 days. You can see for the state of Washington, it's back to roughly normal temperature there, but that's not the case for Southeast Oregon and not at all the case for Idaho. Idaho has been quite a bit warm compared to normal. And that precipitation anomaly that I pointed out earlier has accentuated, so we haven't really had relief in that area east of the Cascades. And there's sort of a dry patch that's opening up in the lower Snake Valley there in southern Idaho. So we've been short on precipitation. I want to note that these stats only go to Saturday, and those of you in Western Washington know at least that we had a pretty significant rain event. You'll see that reflected. You know, that's probably not going to make a big difference over the areas in Washington that we're seeing, but it could, and it's not accounted for here. So what do we see in terms of the stats? Unfortunately, I don't have the October statistics. In part, this is because of Hurricane Helene, which damaged a lot of the infrastructure associated with our main climate data center, which is in Asheville, North Carolina. So it's been a little bit slower to get statistics from them. But the other piece is we can't get statistics till October, until after the month of October, and even in normal times. So I'm just showing you July through September. Apologies for that. But just recapping, you know, and there's a lot of numbers here. The big picture is that July was really hot and dry, so below 50% of normal precipitation, almost 4 degrees Fahrenheit of normal, or average across the Northwest. And then August was a little bit wet and normal in terms of temperature, and then we've been a bit warm and dry, not as extreme as July, but and since then in September especially, but even into October. All right, so what does that mean in terms of water availability? One view of this is to look at the amount of water contained in the soils. This is one estimate of that from the NIDIS website. And what you're seeing is the red and yellow colors, those are below normal conditions, and the greens and blues are above normal conditions. So you can kind of squint your eyes and see that axis that I was mentioning going from Medford to Spokane, and you can see how it's particularly acute in that sort of eastern Columbia Basin, Palouse kind of area south of Spokane. And then you can also see the southern Idaho Snake River Plain piece as well down there. I'll note these are more recent than some of the data I was showing you. This is data that's through the 23rd of October. So on the maps that I was showing you, that's consistent. But again, those stats that I showed only went through September. I wanted to just note that this hasn't changed much in the last week. This is what I found, what you find if you look at it just today. I pulled the map as opposed to when I pulled it last week. So you can see that things are a little bit wetter in Western Washington, but everywhere else, and a little bit drier in Eastern Washington, but everywhere else we're seeing pretty consistent picture, right? So, and this does also tell you that there is a lot of week-to-week change, right? It's the broad patterns are the same, but we do see changes fairly rapidly. So this is one that will change again with time, especially with these rain events that are starting to come. The other thing I wanted to touch on is stream flow, and I'm starting by showing the last water year, so that water year ending on September 30th of this year. This is a plot you've probably seen in previous webinars, and that's something I should mention is I'm new to these webinars because I'm new as the director of the State Climate Office. In the past, you may have seen Karen Bumbako or Nick Bond, and I'm attempting to fill their shoes here. So that bit of background, sorry for forgetting. Background on this slide, what you're seeing in black is the 7-day average stream flow averaged for the Northwest. So this is kind of like an average runoff estimate. And then those shaded bars are those ranges compared to that come from what we've seen in past years. So the blue or the green is middle kind of normal conditions. You see how last winter we kind of bounced around a fair amount, but we were in that green until the springtime because we had very low snowpack. We dropped into those lower bands. So we had really low runoff across the Northwest in most basins, and you see that persisted into summer. If you're squinting, you can probably see the bump in August. We did have a fairly wet August. I showed you those stats, and that did help. In particular in Washington, I think it helped with our fire season. But we were way below normal, right? Summer flows were around 10% of normal for much of the summer. So that's this last water year, and now we're like 30 days almost into this water year, so we're just barely seeing it start. The newest data is always the most questionable, so there's some verification needed, but we have started to see those rain events, and it does look like it's affecting things. So on average, we're bumped up from that below normal to to the normal conditions, according to this plot. So that's good news, and not unexpected, of course, coming into our winter season here. Moving on, there's a lot on this slide. This is courtesy of Larry O'Neill at OSU, and this is reservoir levels in Oregon. And I apologize in advance, I don't have the same for either Washington or Idaho. Like I said, a lot to digest here, but the big picture is that the reservoirs are at or above, or in good shape, I should say, in eastern Oregon. And more mixed in southern and western Oregon. But the conditions in western Oregon in part are affected by a decision requiring additional releases compared to normal for fish purposes. And so what you're seeing is not necessarily a clear indicator of drought in any of these reservoirs, but more of an indicator of changes in management. We had, as we do every summer, lots of fires. It was a pretty average year for Washington. It was a little bit above average for Idaho, but it was particularly a big year for Oregon. And I'm showing a picture here from the Durkee fire, which was one of the two bigger fires. Average number of acres burned in Oregon is under 1 million, and this year already, it's over 1.5 million, so quite a bit more than normal. You can see from this picture that the areas that had a lot of burning were more grassland type habitats and less forested type areas. So that's one important detail about these fires. All right, so as I wrap up, I want to just say, review where we're at in terms of drought status. So this is the drought month, probably around the time of the last webinar. You can see much of the Northwest is in either moderate or more severe drought status. Some just abnormally dry, that's the yellow, but everything darker than yellow is more extreme. August, as I mentioned, was a fairly wet month, so this was better than what we were seeing in July. This is now 1 month ago, end of September. You can see again, drought conditions alleviating apart from this persistent dry patch in western Montana, excuse me. And then just last week, the assessment. So if I scroll back and forth from these, you can see that things are improving but there isn't much improvement. And really what you're seeing here is a reflection of the fact that our rainy season is off to a late start. We've had a pretty dry September, like I showed you from the stats, pretty dry October up to this recent week. And that's reflected in these drought conditions. Okay, I hope I didn't go through those too quickly, but I wanted to stop there and give plenty of time for everyone else.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. Any questions for Guillaume, please put them in the question pod and we'll get to them after we hear from all of our presenters. And now I will switch over to Jonah.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can someone just confirm that they can see my screen?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so my name is Jonna Infanti. I will be presenting the latest climate conditions and CPC outlooks for ENSO temperature, precipitation, and drought. I am substituting for John Gottschalk today. He was the forecaster for the winter outlook. However, I'm happy to answer any questions and forward any questions to him if necessary as well. Beginning with the current climate conditions in the Pacific Ocean, we are currently under an El Niño Southern Oscillation or ENSO alert system status of a La Niña watch. And I'll show you the forecast on the next slide, but basically that means that we are expecting a potential La Niña event coming up over the winter. Currently, however, we do have ENSO neutral conditions in the equatorial Pacific Ocean, as well as an atmosphere that's reflecting ENSO neutral conditions as well. What you can see on the left-hand picture is global sea surface temperatures, where we do have that blue shading for below normal SSTs in the East Central Pacific that have been slowly developing. And then on the right, you can see the ocean temperature for the subsurface, which indicates a reservoir of cooler than normal water, which is the blue shades that you can see here below the surface across much of the Pacific Ocean. So you can see some of those La Niña conditions starting to develop now. And in terms of the ENSO outlook, as I said earlier, we are under a La Niña watch. If you take a look at the blue bars here, what they indicate is the probability of La Niña developing for any of these seasons. So September, October, November is SON. OND means October, November, December, and so on through the remainder of this graph here. So La Niña is favored to develop at about a 60% chance during the September, October, November season. That's the blue bars. And the odds increase to about 75% during the November, December, January season. However, by the time we get to February, March, April 2025, you can see that the gray bars are now winning out, and that means that we are forecasting a transition back to neutral conditions. And in general, the odds are favoring a weak, short duration La Niña event, and that ENSO neutral condition starting to take over by spring in 2025. Now, in terms of the event strength, what this chart shows here is the target month. So again, September, October, November is SON through May, June, July, which is MJJ, along this edge of the chart here. And what this chart shows is the probability for a historically strong, moderate, or weak La Niña event. And that's based off of the predicted sea surface temperature in the Niño 3.4 region of the tropical Pacific. And what you can see, these numbers through JFM 2025, most of them are highest in the weak category here, meaning that SSTs are not expected to be that strong. There are a few probabilities, weaker probabilities for a moderate event, but the majority here are showing that there is predicted to be a weak La Niña. In terms of snow cover, this is the daily snow cover climatology for October 27th and the departure as of October 27th. So anywhere that's blue on this left-hand panel is where we would see snow cover on October 27th. And you can see that's mostly in the northern interior of the US, northern interior of the North America. And then on this slide, on this half of the slide, you can see that there is purple and red shading in some areas. Anywhere where there's purple, that means that there's anomalously high snow cover, and anywhere where there's red, there's anomalously low snow cover, and that's something that we might look at when we're looking at the northern tier of the US for some of our forecasts. But what you can see is that we have mainly white in this plot, meaning that we're right on track for where we would be expected to be in terms of snow cover over much of North America. There's a couple areas where we might see a few grid points that are below normal or above normal, but generally right on track. Now, as I stated earlier, we are expecting there to be a La Nina developing this winter. However, it is expected to be a weak La Nina event. So what we typically do for forecasts is we might look at something called a composite of La Nina events in the past. And because this is a weak La Nina event, what the forecaster this month did is actually looked at composites of a combination of ENSO neutral and weak La Nina events to give more of an indication of what we might expect in terms of temperatures and precipitation for the upcoming seasons. So this is the composite, or it's just an average of some of those ENSO neutral and weak La Nina events based on the 1991 to 2023 period for December, January, February, March, and February, March, April. So this shows us what we might expect for the upcoming winter, though we do have a lot of other tools that we look at. So this isn't the exact thing that we might see. But in general, what you see here is throughout much of the winter, during these weak La Nina events and some ENSO neutral, we would see a cooler northern tier of the US, including the Northwest, transitioning to a warmer southern tier. Now, in terms of precipitation, this is worked exactly the same way. This is a combination of together across the 1991 to 2023 period to give us some indication of what we might be expecting throughout the winter season. What you can see here is that in the Northwest, we do have a couple areas that might have below normal precipitation possibly expected, just right along the coast, transitioning into above normal as you get north central parts of the US. Do have a little bit of a mixed bag in January, and similarly for February, March, April. Now, given that we are expecting some regions of above normal precipitation and below normal temperatures, that means that we might be expecting snow. We don't stratify our outlooks into types of precipitation, but if you have below normal temperatures and above normal precipitation, that can fall as snow. So this is a similar thing. This is a composite of seasonal snowfall departures from normal for all La Nina events. So this is not stratified into weak, moderate, or strong La Nina events. It's all La Nina events. So we're seeing stronger indications of above normal snowfall than we were seeing for above normal precipitation in the prior couple slides, just because of the way that these composites are both made. And this one is not necessarily picking out weaker events. But in a general sense, if you have below normal temperatures, above normal precipitation, you could expect some snowfall, particularly over the higher elevations. Now, in terms of the drought monitor, and these two images here are the same. It's just one is for North America and one is for CONUS. And this is the drought monitor that was released on Tuesday, October 15th, and this will be updated in mid-November 2024. And we already heard a really great summary of this, but for Northwest, much of the region is in at least abnormally dry, with a couple regions that are higher drought categories. And now moving on, I'm going to start looking into some of the forecasts for the periods coming up. And I'm going to go from the short term 8 to 14 day temperature and precipitation outlooks into week 3-4, as well as the seasonal outlooks for the upcoming winter. So this is yesterday's forecast of 8 to 14 day temperature and precipitation. So this is for the period of November 4th through 10th. This will be updated by 4 p.m. this afternoon, so you can visit this site here to get that updated forecast. So just pointing out that in the beginning of November, what we might expect for the Northwest is above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation. So these red shades here are higher probabilities for above normal temperatures, And the brown shades here are higher probabilities for below normal precipitation. As we start moving further into November, so now we're looking at the week 3-4 period for November 9th through 22nd, 2024. The forecast is a bit more uncertain in terms of temperatures for the Northwest. The white areas indicate that there's equal chances of above and below normal temperatures for the Northwest. But we do have this sliver of above normal precipitation, which is just a 55 to 60% probability that there could be above normal precipitation over the Northwest. And this will be updated this coming Friday at about 3 p.m. And you can check this link here if you want to get an updated forecast for week 3-4. Now turning our attention now to the winter outlook. There's a number of things that go into the forecast for the winter outlook. As I said earlier, we do look at what a typical La Niña winter might look like. However, this particular winter, we're looking more at a weaker La Niña. So the forecaster did look at a combination of composites to get an idea. Though, of course, we do look at other tools. That's not the only thing that we look at. So some of the images might look a little bit different from that composite I showed earlier, because we do have positive and negative long-term temperature trends, additional statistical forecast tools, dynamical climate models, statistical hybrid forecast tools that are linked to other climate predictors, not just ENSO. And then where appropriate, and in some instances where it may be appropriate, coastal SSTs and surface moisture conditions as well. So there's a number of things that we look at for the winter outlook, not just composites of what we might see during a La Niña year. That can cause a few differences. And the other thing that I want to note here is that because this is a weak expected La Niña event, we're showing 3-month seasonal means of our predictions. But there can be a lot of variability in that season. So while we might see as a season as a whole below normal temperatures and above normal precipitation, for instance, there can be periods within that season that can be more variable. So intraseasonal variability is what we call that. So I'm going to start with November, December, January temperature and precipitation outlooks. And if you want to see more information, you can visit the link here. What you can see over the Northwest is this white region, which means, and some areas of above normal, but broadly equal chances of above, near, and below normal temperatures are expected over the Northwest, along with a weak probability of above normal precipitation. And you can see that there is a little bit of a dip in that probability towards the coast, which is owing to some of the variability that we were seeing in the weak La Niña composites earlier. And one thing that's really interesting and cool, if you take a look at these, the website for these images, you can see some of the probabilities if you click on individual regions. So, for example, if you take a look at the Southwest, I know this is geared towards the Northwest, but just for example's sake, you can see there's a 66% chance of above normal temperatures. Doesn't mean there's no chance of below normal, but it is very low probability, and then a 31% chance of near normal. So if anyone's interested in doing something like that, it's something you can take a look at. Then moving on to December, January, February, you can see that now below normal temperatures are favored for the Northwest, along with a weak probability of above normal precipitation. And then January, February, March, fairly similar, below normal temperatures, above normal precipitation. And what that means for the drought outlook is that by the end of January 2024, we do see some regions of drought removal likely. That's the green color, as well as some tan, which is drought remains but improves. And that aligns with some of those regions of enhanced above normal precipitation probabilities. Now for take-home messages, this is likely to be a weak, short duration La Niña event for winter 2024-2025. The coverage and degree of typical La Niña impacts is highly uncertain, though they are considered. We might expect high variability and frequent subseasonal changes this winter as compared to more persistent or consistent conditions. And the winter conditions are anticipated to be quite different from last winter, where there was a strong El Niño established. The last couple bullet points here are just going over some of the take-home messages from the forecasts. So I'll let you read those yourself. Above normal temperatures and a mixture of about equal chances and below normal temperatures over the Northwest, and then some potential for drought removal. And we do suggest that you monitor CBC extended range and subseasonal forecasts as we go through the winter and early spring seasons, as these can aid in situational awareness for decisions that can be made with less lead time, and due to the earlier note that we might expect some variability within this season given the weak expected La Niña. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonna. Any questions for Jonna, please put them in the questions pod. Next, we'll hear from Robin.
All right, one moment, please. Just trying to get this all set. All right, wonderful. Hello, my name is Robin Fox. I am the service hydrologist at the National Weather Service in Spokane. And I just wanted to give you a little overview of the National Water Prediction Service. This is the new water resource webpage that is linked on the National Weather Service sites. It shows the national water model and much more. And given the outlooks for above normal precipitation for the upcoming winter season, leading to maybe higher stream flows, this is a great time to show a demo of this, which is what I'm going to do for you. So this page actually is a replacement of the older AHAPS page that I'm sure many of you have been accustomed to. It gave river observations, river forecast points, and it's been around since the 1990s. This new page came about this last spring, and it is linked to all the Weather Service sites under the River and Lakes tabs. And there are two options that you can view, either the national view or the local view, which is based off of every Weather Service office. So here is the view of the national look right there, and the link that you can click and follow along if you'd like, but I'm going to give you a little demo to kind of go through all the different parts of the National Water Prediction Service, otherwise known as NWIPS. So we'll go right here to the page, and this is the national link that I'm pulling up. So this new page leverages a modern infrastructure with GIS technology. It has dynamic features that can be used before, during, and after a high flow or flood event. We still have the view of precipitation estimates and long-range outlooks. It's just repackaged differently. And there are many key features that enhance this experience. The map is dynamic. It has layers that we can structure and tailor to your needs. And it's an easier access to view the National Water Model data, along with the phased-in approach of the Weather Service's flood inundation mapping that is going to be going across the country. So when you first open up the NWIPS page, you'll notice at the top there is a little banner that talks about special links that you can learn more with instructions and more information about the new features. This banner will probably go away in the next couple months, but it's there to provide easy access to review things. And on this national view, you can scroll in and out to different areas. And what shows up right away on the map are all of these dots that show the river observations and forecast points that you can see on that menu on the right-hand side. One thing I also want to point out is when you scroll in and out, if you want to get back to the main page, you just click the National Water Prediction Services name and you will go back to the front national page right from there. So let's look at this menu feature. Well, first of all, on the maps, you can switch it to different views, from topographic to satellite view and dark or light view, and the overlays are adjusted so you can see all the different features on the map. So the first thing that we're going to see of the layers are the river gauges, and we can scroll into an area. So we'll go over the Pacific Northwest, and we can see the different observations that are linked and the forecasts as well. We can go to the search bar and search for an area, let's say such as the state of Washington, and it zeroes in on the area. We can do that for a city, for a forecast point, for a river. And we can see a close-up view of all the gauges and sites across the state. We can also click on this button, Limit by Boundary, and we can get all of the sites and gauges within that boundary within the state of Washington. So that is a pretty amazing feature with that. I also wanted to show some of the other features on the menu. One is a hazards layer, which is something that we see with the National Weather Service Hazards and Observation Viewer. Right now, the default is all hydrologic hazards, but we can enable and show all National Weather Service hazards, from winter storms to high winds to red flags, that feature all across the country. So it's nice to have that right at our fingertips. In addition, we can go down to the administrative boundaries at the bottom and click on, let's say, a WFO boundary, or if you wanted to highlight the county boundary a little bit more, that is available and you can customize the colors. And in fact, when you add the different layers on this feature, you can bookmark it and return to all those different layers as well. Also near the bottom, we have the different hydrologic discussions from the National Water Center for the nationwide area and different focused areas, along with a flood hazard outlook that you're welcome to view and are updated. Okay, so now what I wanted to do is show you how these gauge sites look on the page. So I wanted to click on one in Washington that is standing out right here. That's yellow. This is the Scohomish River near Potlatch. You can see the inner circle is yellow, which is the observation, and the square, which is the forecast, is also yellow. So we click on that and we get the quick view of this site, which shows the Scohomish River near Potlatch, showing the observation in the yellow, which is above the action stage. It also shows the official forecast from the National Weather Service River Forecast Center as well. If we scroll down, we see the dynamic feature of this, that we can go back in time up to 30 days to see when the previous rises were and how that river was behaving, along with a forecast that goes out 10 days in advance. So also scrolling down, we get all the categories of the flooding levels listed and the different levels that we can scale to the flood categories as well. And below, we have the information of where this site is located, in what forecast area, and links to the USGS site as well. Also, I want to point out, we can share some of this data with this little hamburger button right here, where we can view the static hydrograph, which is something that many of us were used to with the AHAPS pages, and also links to being able to download images and PDFs of the forecasts and observations as well. Now I want to switch to another site here. We're going to go over to the Wenatchee River at Peshastin, and shows similar information as well. But up at the top, we have a button that says full information. And when we click on that full information, we get more details with this river forecast point, including the hydrograph of the observations and the forecast data from the River Forecast Center. We also have the flood impacts that are listed. We see a map that we can zoom in on where the gauge is and being able to switch the backgrounds to show the data, like the satellite data view as well. But also really important is the probabilistic forecasts that are available from the River Forecast Center that show the weekly chance of exceeding levels over the weeks to come, comparing it to flood stage. Also, the chance of exceeding levels during an entire period, giving you planning through the flood season. And then the short-term hydrologic probabilistic forecast, the HEFS forecast, that shows the probabilities of that river gauge getting to a certain level and comparing it to the different flood levels. So these forecasts are available for all of the river forecast sites on the full menu page. Now I wanted to scroll back up to the top and also share with you the National Water Model guidance. This is a guidance that is all computer generated, and it shows you on the splash screen with that this is experimental and all computer, but it is available for all the streams and rivers across the country. And right away it shows one of the versions of the National Water Model, which would be the short range, but it also has a medium range and long range ensembles as well. And we can turn on the observations and compare how they're doing along with the official forecast from the Northwest River Forecast Center. So this is just another example, more guidance to help many of the users look at the data and see how things are tracking as we go into the future. I know this is a lot of information. There's a lot on here. A couple more things I just want to show before we run out of time is...
we are getting close, Robin.
Okay, I just wanted to show precipitation estimates are available on this page, which was on the old page. We can see departures from normal and percent of normal. And lastly, I also wanted to show snow is available too from the no risk data, that we can see the snow depth and snow water equivalent as well. And maybe at a future time I can talk more about flood inundation mapping, but that is available as well. And the Pacific Northwest is part of 30% of the country that has it turned on for this coming water year. So I encourage you to take a look at it, and welcome to any questions for me at a later date. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Robin. I'm really interested in checking out this tool. Next, we'll go to Tara. We can see your slides. But you are muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Hi, I'm Tara Huderberg. I am a professor at the University of Idaho, and I'm here to tell you about this large new project we have just launched. So EMBER, Embedding Molecular Biology and Ecosystem Research, is an NSF Biology Integration Institute. We are scientists and educators from the University of Idaho, Washington State University, the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, Bonneville Environmental Foundation, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, UC Berkeley, University of Missouri, and the Carey Institute for Ecosystem Studies. So we're a large team, but that was the point of forming this institute as well. Most of us have worked together in subgroups in the past, but never all together, and we're about 6 months in, and we just finished our first field season, yay. We're really excited to keep doing this. And also excited to tell you about our plans. So as all of you know, trying to get my slide to advance. I'm sorry, moderator, every time I hit the spacebar, it's muting myself instead of advancing my slide.
Okay, well, we can still hear you. Do you want to have me reshare with you to see if that helps?
Maybe I can find the, here we go. I'll just use the arrows. Got it.
There you go.
Okay, so as you all know, fire is a fundamental Earth system process. However, Western US fires are rapidly becoming larger, more frequent, and more severe. While historical fire regimes were critical for maintaining forest ecosystem services, fires today, compounded with drought, threaten forest persistence. The Western US is extremely carbon dense and has very carbon dense forests and some of the most productive carbon dense forests in the world, actually. And they are critical for maintaining what we call the terrestrial carbon sink. So when I say carbon sink, I mean that the ecosystem I'm talking about removes more carbon dioxide from the atmosphere than it releases. So this, for forests, this means that photosynthesis, that plant uptake of carbon, is exceeding cellular respiration processes by plants and microbes and other animals in the system. So while many of our tree and microbial species in the Pacific Northwest have evolved traits that make them resilient to drought and often benefit from fire, in recent decades, we're seeing that many forests are failing to recover, and we don't necessarily understand why, not from a biological or organismal point of view. And while we were developing EMBER, we synthesized over 500 findings and studies from decades of research on wildfire research. And we found that while there's been a lot of studies that have generalized post-fire impacts, and we know that there's biomass loss and there's a lack of seedling regeneration and there's mortality, there's very little information about the biological impacts at the mechanistic level to the actual microbes and the trees being impacted. And so we've been looking at this for a while in our subdisciplines, and then discovered that, you know, maybe we need to bring in more people from other biological subdisciplines, especially those studying processes at smaller scales, to really move the needle on this and actually be able to provide some solutions to mitigating these climate change impacts on our forests and our tree species. So, sorry, I forgot to advance my slide, but we approached some molecular and cellular biologists and got to what I'm calling like actually embedding them within this ecosystem science research that a lot of climate and carbon cycle scientists have been working on, kind of in a silo, and not really reaching out to those other biologists that are more lab focused and molecular and cellular focused, in order to get at some of these big questions about forest resilience with all of this stress. So what we're doing then is, and EMBER's vision is to identify the key traits and variables that govern how biological communities respond to and interact with stress. We're investigating how stress reduces carbon uptake and microbial metabolism. And while we're focused on fire and drought right now, we're not going to ignore the impacts of other core stressors, because this launch of this institute is to really have the foundation for an institute that can persist for, you know, right now we're funded for 6 years, but into the next decade, so that we can look at these long-term impacts to our experiments and really get at the fundamental knowledge and provide more knowledge about the mechanisms about how trees can survive, right, and how microbes might help them. So we've done this approach where we're integrating across all of these different disciplinary expertise. And for those of you in the audience who are maybe more field biologists like me, it's been pretty fun getting people out of the lab that have never been and done field work, and you know, they're both excited but a little bit nervous about what they're calling the wild microbiome out there, because they really just had a very controlled lab atmosphere where they knew the biome, what microbes they were looking at, and so this is very new for them, but pretty exciting. And so this diversity via our approaches, we're a research institute focused on this pretty large question, but at the same time, we're also trying to combine approaches and methods that haven't been really combined in the past in order to answer our science questions. So it's challenging, but and communication is key. So this team I'm here, and I mentioned the institutions earlier, but so we're very diverse, and we're diverse in a lot of different ways, and still understanding each other, and still talking about how we are going to move from this wild atmosphere into this controlled lab atmosphere, and then still have the information be relevant. But we're building on decades of our own research labs, and then just combining those approaches in order to really push what we're calling pushing the needle forward on getting to where we can provide solutions and not just scientific knowledge about how the processes work. So just a little bit about how we're focusing at first and really looking at soil. So wildfire can leave soils ranging anywhere from what we are calling lightly barbecued to fireplace ash. And the chemistry of burn soil follows this trajectory ranging from the generation of char, so that biochar, to a complete combustion of the organic carbon. And char and ash each contain a lot of toxins that we are going to be looking at, and then we'll be able to test alone and in combination and in mixtures from intact soil the microbial and response. And this is part about bringing in those molecular and cellular perspectives and approaches to really be able to isolate some of the processes in communities that are very diverse, right? So both the communities of microbes living on the phylosphere, on the leaves, and the communities living in the soil, it present challenges, but also it's what we want to be studying. We want to be studying how this happens in the wild. And so we're focusing on the broad scale question right now, is that what are these key molecular stress responses to these toxins, and how do these stressors alter community composition? So to do this, and this is where we get to the drought part. For the first 3 years of EMBER, we are imposing a worse drought than what you've been hearing about earlier. We're right smack dab in those maps we saw earlier of I think an extreme to moderate drought, according to the Drought Center maps that we saw earlier. So we have built a giant roof in the woods. We've built 4 of these, and we've got them in Western red cedar and Doug fir stands and in a ponderosa pine stand. And this is our goal is to just kind of exclude as much water as we can in order to be able to just have this experiment of drought stress that is worse than it normally is, plus the fact that we're going to burn the soils in 3 years and then have that fire and drought response. And then the way that we're doing it with the lab folks is we'll be bringing in samples from these experiments that are in the field, and then they'll do their controlled experiments in the lab to really look at the community composition and how the microbes respond to the stress. So we're focusing on mostly the two tree species of pea pine and Doug fir, which also many of you know about, and we are hoping to be able to extend that to a few other species, but right now most of the work honestly has been focused on getting that experiment installed in the forest and making sure that all our instrumentation is working, and that we can work out the process with the lab biologists for bringing those samples in and having them be able to continue with the work in the lab. So, and just a brief sort of look at how we're just finally just bridging those fields as to handle the complexity associated with this. We'll have our laboratory data from stress that is applied in these controlled settings that'll guide a targeted analysis with the wild microbiomes, as they are calling them. And so, for instance, we're going to test whether the transcription of a particular gene or a metabolite correlates with a microbial process, and then we can look at how that microbial process translates to something in the field, like the rate of litter decomposition or that nutrient release that affects seedling survival. We're not also just doing that field work and that lab work, but we're also going to be doing modeling, which is my wheelhouse of predicting future carbon trajectories. So we use process-based models, and this is where the climate data is particularly relevant, because we can have the long-term climate data sets from the past or the future predictions, but I think it's going to be really great to be able to use these near forecasts, especially when I'm thinking about our field experiments where we're trying to impose a drought and then how that'll synergize with that. And also for being able to drive short-term modeling forecasts of how the forest carbon sink is responding. So EMBER is not just doing research, we're also doing some outreach activities. We have a partnership with the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and what we're doing is we're setting up with them what we're calling an Indigenous Innovation Lab, which will integrate tribal youth and teachers into EMBER field and lab experiments. And this lab is, we're hoping it will start addressing the disparity between the fact that there's only been one Coeur d'Alene tribal member ever to get a PhD in a STEM field. So we're trying to rectify that by having this embedded process where we're just also working together with the tribe that looks at the impacts of fire and drought on ecosystems, but in a way that honors Indigenous knowledge and integrates students in meaningful data collection so that we can generate co-knowledge. And then I'm going to just go to my outcome slide because I think that we were asked to provide you guys with outcomes, but I don't have the main takeaways are mainly that we're doing this project. These are what we want to accomplish in 6 years. And so this like determining thresholds for forest recovery, predicting how the stress will impact the carbon sink, being able to develop these pathways and methods for scientists to work together to have this co-generated knowledge that spans the biological subdisciplines, train the next generation of scientists. We have a lot of trainees to be able to transcend disciplines and really work together to, to make solutions or to come up with solutions for climate change and its impacts on forests. And that'll involve a communication framework. And I think we're out of time, but this is the team. And yeah, we're still in the building phase, and we're pretty ambitious, but pretty excited.
Thank you very much, Tara. I really appreciate that. If folks have questions, we are past time, so here are everybody's emails. We'll get the questions we have received to the speakers so that they're able to follow up with you. Any general questions for the webinar, please reach out to Jason, and then mark your calendar for the first snow drought status update on the 11th of December, and then our next webinar will be on the 16th of December. Thank you very much for our speakers and for everyone attending. We appreciate it, and I hope you all have a great day.